Hello everybody, Mr. Jones here again. Today's a little different. I'm going to go through some art history with you, but if you stick around to the end, there's a really cool art project you can do. So today we're going to be talking about Surrealism, which is very strange art. Surrealism had its peak in the 1920s through the 1940s. So what they do in art history is they kind of put things in a little box, like when was it in the top 10 of best of art, had its most fame, and that was for Surrealism about the 1920s to the 1940s. There are still people today doing Surrealism, but the peak of Surrealism's popularity was around the 1920s through the 1940s. It wasn't just art. There was also writers like Andre Breton and filmmakers that were doing Surrealism, so it kind of covered a whole bunch of stuff. To understand Surrealism, you have to know a little bit about Sigmund Freud. Freud kind of developed psychoanalysis, and it became very popular in the early 1900s. Freud's theory was that when you sleep, your primitive brain, your animal brain, he called it the id, sends messages to your conscious brain, which is the ego, he called it the ego, and trying to tell your ego what you actually want, what the animal part of you really wants, food, things like that. Well, the message gets jumbled up, and you end up having these really weird dreams that don't make a whole lot of sense. So Freud thought he could have you lay on the couch, tell you about your dream, tell him about your dreams, and he could interpret them and figure out what you really needed and what you really wanted. Most of his science has kind of been debunked in the past several decades. But back then, this was very popular, and including the Surrealists. Everybody was like, "Oh, I need to know about my dreams. I need to. That's where the hidden secret is in my dreams." So you have a bunch of artists that start painting their dreams. Here we have Max Ernst. He did sort of this robotic elephant-looking thing, and then you have Chirico. He did this sort of open landscape with the shadowy sculpture and the tower at the end. There's a lot of open spaces in surreal art. I guess that's what they thought dreams look like. So you'll see a lot of like open spaces in the background. Here's another one by Chirico. You have these weird sort of sculpture figures on this big open sort of space there. So they're painting their dreams. Whatever they dreamed of, they would paint that the next day. Now, one of the most famous, more famous surrealists was Magritte. Magritte was Belgian, which is right near France. And really, Magritte liked to mess with people's heads. So this painting here is a pipe, and it says under it in French, "This is not a pipe." And so he's messing with your expectations because he's right. This is not a pipe. This is a painting of a pipe. So he's kind of talking about what is art. You know, what is this thing? It's not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe. Here's a painting called "Not to be Reproduced." I mean, how weird would it be for you to go up to a mirror and see the back of your head? That would be a creepy dream type of thing. So here it is. Now, one of the things that the Surrealists did was they tried to paint as realistically as possible. Because think about it, if you have a special effect in a movie, it's more believable if it looks realistic. If it looks sort of fake and phony, it's not so good. So these artists really looked back at the Renaissance artists and tried to paint as realistically as possible, even though they were doing dreams. Here's another Magritte. Magritte was fascinated with all the business people. They all seem to be wearing the same hat and coats and carrying briefcases. And here it's raining sort of businessmen, bankers. So it's a very surreal image. And here's one called "Son of Man," where the person's face is an apple. We all know about the Adam and Eve story, so there you go. And he's wearing sort of the businessman outfits. Magritte didn't really like being referred to as a surrealist, though. He left the group kind of early. He just thought of his stuff as more of his own. The most famous of the surrealists is Salvador Dali. He was born in Spain. He has this crazy mustache like that. And Dali, he told everybody that he was the only surrealist. He also said that he didn't have to sleep to dream. He could have dreams while he was awake. everything about him was surrealism. His life, he had a pet anteater that he used to take for walks. He Everything about him was just very surreal. One of his most famous paintings is The Persistence of Memory, and here you have his face is sort of melted, and there's these melting clocks all over. The big open space, like I said, dreams apparently have a bunch of open spaces in them. You see that in cartoons and movies too. There's a bunch of ants crawling on the clocks here. Dolly was really into ants for some reason. They're all over the place. This one's called Metamorphosis of Narcissus. So here you have a figure that's got its head on the knee and is looking down into the water. And Dolly liked to morph things. So over here you have the same sort of shapes, but it's a hand holding an egg with a flower coming out the top. So he liked to change things. I actually saw this painting in person. I thought it would be this huge painting. It was actually about this big. It was the tiny, tiny painting. And there's all these little details in here. And Dolly used to paint with a one-hair brush to get those. And the reason he painted small was he could put all of his paintings in a briefcase and move from city to city. So it made it easy to carry them. Here's one. Again, he likes to look at things and see if he could change them into other things. So this is a bowl with pears, but it's also a face if you start looking at it. So he liked to see other things in things. Here's, he went, later in his life, he went back and redid The Persistence of Memory. And here he made it a little bit more complex, added a fish for some reason, and kind of broke it down and made it more geometrical. So he did that a lot. A lot of people don't realize that Dolly was actually friends with Walt Disney. Walt Disney considered himself an artist, like all the other artists, Picasso and Dolly, and he would try and hang out with them as much as he could. And here you have Dolly and Walt Disney on a boat, having dinner together. And Walt invited Dolly to come to the Disney studio and work on some animation. They were working on a movie called Fantasia, and Walt wanted Dolly to do a whole segment of it. And Dolly did everything for it. He storyboarded it, had it all ready to go, but they never finished it. Dolly got bored and left. And it just sat there. And a few years back, the Disney company decided, oh, let's make it. We have all the storyboards, we have everything. And they actually finally made the movie. It's called Destino. And if you search around online, you can usually find it. But it's very much inspired by Dolly's paintings. And it's almost like a Dolly painting come to life. It's very weird. So if you get a chance to see it, look for it. It's actually very neat. At one point, the ballerina turns into her head turns into a baseball, and the guy hits the baseball. It's called Destino. Dolly lived to be 89. That's pretty old for anybody. And he kept working for most of his life. And really, if there's like one person that's associated with Surrealism, it's Salvador Dali. Now, when I was teaching Surrealism to a bunch of second graders, I finished the whole thing talking about it, and I asked if there were any questions. I had a little girl, she raised her hand, and I said, yes, and she said, Fruit Loops. And I said, Fruit Loops? And she said, yeah, that's my favorite surreal. I thought that was funny. So I came up with a project where you do a surreal cereal. Very hard to say. Try saying it 5 times fast. Very hard to say. Anyways, and if you think about it, cereals are kind of surreal. So you have Fruity Pebbles. If I told someone who didn't know about Fruity Pebbles, hey, what's for breakfast? Fruity Pebbles, they'd look at me like, we're going to eat rocks? What? There's all kinds of weird cereals going on that you can find out there. So the trick is, the first thing is you want to come up with a strange name for your cereal. Now the best thing to do is sort of just randomly pick 2 things, like toenails and monkeys, and that becomes the name of your cereal. Monkey toenails. Yes, it's weird, but it's also surreal. Okay? Company name. So on the box, to make it look more realistic, if you have the company name like Post, Kellogg's, or if you want to come up with your own company, it just makes it look more realistic. What flavor? Now it could be chocolate, strawberry, whatever. But remember, this is surreal, so it could taste like the tears of elephants. The flavor could be sweaty socks. Okay, so don't try and be normal. Be weird. Go out there and think about what kind of weird cereal would you see in your dreams. You should have an image of what the cereal looks like. The shape, the color. Does it have marshmallows? Hey, that can be really weird too. So think about when people buy things, they want to know what it looks like. So most products have a picture of the food on the front. I wouldn't buy something if it didn't have a picture on the front of what it looked like. I want to know what it's going to look like if I'm going to eat it. Okay? Most cereal boxes have a solid background, so that means don't make the background too complicated. Just solid color, blue, yellow, orange, just a solid color. That way the name and the name of your cereal should be the biggest words on the front of your box. But those things will stand out. A character. A lot of cereals have characters. Captain Crunch, Tony the Tiger with Frosted Flakes, the Honeybee for Honey Nut Cheerios. So, and that can be weird too. Think about it. Some of those characters. Why is a tiger with Frosted Flakes? Just doesn't make sense. It's surreal. Okay, so think of a character. Now, here's an example of a cereal box that one of my students did. This is Dragon Flakes. They have the company name up here in the corner. They have Dragon Flakes. Biggest thing on there is the name of the cereal. The flavor, it's spicy. And then a picture of what the cereal looks like, the colors of the cereal. And the character, which is a little cute dragon. And then down here, this is something you can add. It's the net weight thing that's on the front of all the boxes. And if you do that, it makes it look much more realistic if you have that on there. Now, when we do this in class, we took apart a cereal box. And it's actually one big sheet of paper, and we figured out how it was put together. And we made a template of that, and then we would draw on it and do all the sides, the ingredient side and everything, and then we glue it together and create the box. But all you guys have to do is just the front of the cereal, just the front. If you want to get more ambitious and try and do a box, you can do that. But you just need to do the front. Remember, it's supposed to be surreal. It's supposed to be weird. Okay, so don't try not to be too normal with it. And have fun and be safe.